Welcome to Love and Speak the Truth, a podcast with Sister B and friends. It might get messy, sacred to secular. Don't judge. All voices will be heard here. So listen up. We're going to explore the human experience through the lens of wisdom sharing and faith, with a worldview that might shock you, move you, even downright inspire you. Today, I'm coming to you with an oracle of love named Natalie Rivera, a talented and brilliant person of multiracial, multicultural heritage that is full of richness. Natalie says there is always a longing to go home. We banter about meaning, understanding, identity, and living in the gray. We wax on about moving from the square to a circle and intentionally living in the gray. Oh, and it's a real mashup of querying queerness, judging and judgment, and wrestling with Saint Ignatius himself. You will love this young and bright person, and you will learn something about yourself. What's it all about? Everything. Let's listen. So, welcome, Natalie. I am so excited to have you on the program. Not sure what exactly we're going to get to today, but you're brilliant, you're young, you have energy, and I can't wait to hear a little bit about how being on Love and Speak the Truth will enlighten our listeners. So, welcome.
Thank you, Sister Brenda. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Natalie, I wonder if you could just let's begin by, sharing a little bit about yourself, where you are. Uh, I probably eventually want to get to something of your heritage. What do you know about your heritage, and
Mm.
and even your age group? Maybe just let's begin by giving us some context of Natalie.
Yeah. So I was born in Chicago, lived there for the first 18 years of my life, and then came out to California, Los Angeles, to attend USC. Just graduated in the spring. Now I'm just kind of living out here. Let's see, my heritage. My family is Black and German and Puerto Rican. My mom is a half and half mix of the first two, and then my dad is full Puerto Rican. I'd say that I'm definitely more connected to my Black and German heritage.
Mhm.
Growing up, that was just instilled in us. My whole family on my mom's side is from Chicago, and a lot of them are still there. So that was kind of really given to us. And I see that as a gift, definitely. When I think about my heritage, I also think about how I've made it my own by moving across the United States. I know that kind of seems contradictory, but for me, it's really been a discovery of what elements can I take with me and what elements do I want to maybe make my own. And I'm always longing to go home. My immediate family, I have a niece and a nephew, and they're pretty small, and I want to see them grow up and be able to share that heritage with them in the way that it
Mhm.
was shared with me.
Yeah. So we're talking here now about your family and that sense of heritage from your genes and your relations, your growing up, your where you come from geographically. But where do you think that heritage connects to who you are? Who you are, Natalie Rivera, young, bright, independent, full of life. How do you define yourself in terms of that heritage, but in terms of who you're becoming?
I think one of the things that I've inherited are the morals and the values from my family. Thing that has stayed with me, values of honesty and communication, trust, intimacy, togetherness. And I think I try to live that out even though I'm so far away. But in the people that I connect with here, because I've learned it so much from back home, I think it would be remiss to not talk about religion, since this is, love and speak the truth about kind of faith and spirituality. So I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school, St. Ignatius in Chicago, and it was a difficult time for me. I had always been taught that Catholicism was a central part of my identity. And then I went to school for, exploring my identity because everybody does in high school. And it was really hard to do so in a place where that identity is not especially respected. St. Ignatius is primarily white and pretty wealthy. And as a Black queer person, it wasn't very tolerant towards me or my friends. I'd say that, I came in with the expectation that this is a place for me to grow more into myself. And I felt like I grew opposite. I felt like
Oh,
I was further leaving behind who I knew I was and trading them out for somebody who was straight or had straight hair or, um, dressed up in fancy clothes. And I know these are all physical appearances, but they do really reflect on who you are as a person, especially when you are that young. So having religion be represented to me in that way kind of shied me away from it as I got older. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've been trying to live more true to myself about is kind of the gray areas. And I feel that during high school and especially at the, place that I went to, it felt that there was only black and white. And I am very much gray. Being kind of in the middle of male and female and, you know, being in the middle of my life, it's I'm still kind of figuring out what is right and what is wrong and what feels good to me and what doesn't. And I think kids need that a lot when they grow up, but they don't need it so much that, it confines them. And that's what I felt that it did for me. So moving
mhm.
away from that, moving across the country really helped me center myself in that gray area to take a look at all of the things I had been given, all of my heritage, and decide what works for me.
I am hearing you, and a couple of things come to my mind as you speak. First of all, that Jesuit Ignatian tradition of finding God in all things, in all
Mm,
people, in all
mhm,
places, seeing not only the face of God, but the nature of God. Hmm? And when you think of God creating us male and female, God didn't say I created you male or female, did God? I created us male and female. And someplace in the middle there, this sort of androgynous notion of a God that can be big enough for everybody didn't get expressed there in your high school. And
yeah.
somehow you found yourself in the middle of this black and white zone.
Mhm,
We do that to each other, don't we?
yeah.
We're either or people sometimes. And sometimes religion sort of puts us into that box. And am I missing it, or is that something that you can relate to, huh? Can you imagine, as you just tried to share with me a minute ago, this this instead of living in the gray of where you found yourself, there's a brilliance in that gray. You know, there's a beauty in that gray, but
Mhm.
somehow forced into a box of either or. It sounds like it was debilitating for you, not life giving, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a very difficult time. I think it's no fault of our own, just based on survival instincts. Sometimes you have to make a decision based on black and white, as we are instinctual beings. It's what we do, and that serves us really well. And at the same time, it's also helpful to be a little bit more graceful with the way that we define things.
Now, you just said you defined yourselves and you used the word queer. How do you define that? What does that mean for you?
Yeah.
I never understood it. So that's you're giving me a little education here.
Sister Brenda, I don't understand myself. I think that
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the beauty of it. I used to say, I'm pansexual or I'm gay or, lesbian, coming up with all of these different terms. And really, the only one that made me feel like myself was the most vague one, which is queer. Queer is kind of the umbrella term of everyone in the LGBTQ community. So that's
Mhm.
lesbian, gay, bi, and trans. So yeah, that's what queerness is to me. And I know that it kind of has negative connotations of meaning like otherness or a difference in a bad way. Um,
Mm.
but to me, it just means living outside of expectations and outside of the norms in a way that's comfortable.
And you're growing into that. How does that feel for you now at what are you now, 23?
22.
22? How does that feel for you now as you continue to define who you want to be, how you want to be known, addressed in your particular community? How is that different at 22 than at 18 when you went out to California to go to university and maybe try to fit into another box? Maybe you were boxed in there as well.
Yeah. It definitely was another box, leaving one box for another. But the
Mhm.
box that I came into in California was not a box, it was a circle. It had everyone in it. And I didn't have to, put myself up against a wall to try to fit in. I think I've really surrounded myself with people who respect me for me. And still, I'm defining that now. I don't think I'll ever stop defining it. But just having that unconditional love from people who surround me to explore whoever I want to be and for them to be there. No questions asked, no judgments. Circling back to heritage, I wanted to say that not all things that we inherit are good, serve us. And I think there are so many things that do serve me and are good. And one thing that I've been trying really hard to distance myself from is judgment, especially self judgment. I think my family is quite judgmental. And that's not to say it's a good thing or a bad thing, it just doesn't really serve me. And I think freeing myself from that judgment externally, from Catholic school and maybe from my family, has helped me be less judgmental in myself and helped me experiment with that.
There could be two sides of that judgment. I think judging is very human.
Oh, yeah.
It's sometimes very brutally, and sometimes very compassionately. And we're not given to allowing our vulnerabilities to show. And so we begin to put the masks on in order to not show the real self. But that's a real human condition, isn't it? Judgment. How do you really distance yourself from something that is ingrained?
Yeah. I've done a lot of work in cognitive behavioral therapy, and
Uh-huh.
that's kind of when you're changing your thought patterns. So you
Yeah.
identify a thought that you have. Take, for example, self judgment. I look bad today, or I am wrong. Something's wrong with me. You identify it, you see where it comes from, and then you decide if it's helpful or not. I think that's the critical part in this because some judgment is helpful, some judgment keeps you moving forward. But in the case of, that voice in my head that says, oh, I look bad today, or oh, something's wrong with me, that doesn't help me. So that moment of thinking, what is best for me? How can I best love myself? and
Yeah.
then, deciding to do something about it. Do I want to maybe tweak my thought pattern and say, oh, can I focus on something else? Or I don't know. There's a lot of techniques that I've been using over the years.
It's kind of coming to terms with that flight or fright notion of when do I look at these areas of judgment and not become stymied by them in ways that can be hurtful to self or
Hmm.
hurtful to others. You're a woman, and I need you to correct me there. How would you like for me to address the whole gender? We have it so stuck in the mind, the box that we need to put people in. Set me straight
Hmm.
here. Give me a
Person.
little lesson.
That's all you have to say. I'm a
Hmm?
person.
You're a person.
Mhm. I will say one of the mantras at St. Ignatius, I think they changed it halfway while I was there, was men and women for others. And that's such a powerful statement, to be so vulnerable that you would give yourself to others, for others. But then you look at it and you say, okay, what if I'm not a man or a woman? How do I serve others in that way? And then you also look at it, and I think this is something that I struggled with for a long time and I'm still working through. How can I pour from my own cup to others if my cup is empty? I think that was really hard for me to wrap my head around because it felt like men and women for others no matter what they're going through. And wow, how selfless, how lovely that statement is, except what if I have nothing in my cup? you know?
You don't identify. So what we need to say is person for others, persons for others. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah.
Is that more inclusive, a little bit more determinative of who you are and how you can engage in that life-giving give and take?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people see it as selfish. Personally, I think it would be nice if we could say men and women or people for ourselves and for others. To say that ourselves part first. To say, okay, when I get up in the morning, I'm going to give to myself the self love that I want to show to the world. I can't give the world love if I don't know what it looks like to myself.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, we would do, volunteers and retreats and events, I guess, but it just felt like there was a separation that didn't need to be there between ourselves and others. And I think if we really put, because there's two sides of that sentence, there's the people and then for, and then whoever it is. And if we put ourselves along with the others, then we're becoming one. We're serving a greater good and not just other people.
I think to bring a little religion and spirituality and God-centeredness in that way of expressing it, Natalie, is some the greatest commandment Jesus talked about. And that greatest commandment is to, love God, obviously, but to love others the way you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Love yourself. The first thing you have to do is get, as you just said, some content. You need to have the content that reflects the love you have for yourself in order to love other people well. Can you resonate with how does that sound for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I think it's that wasn't told to us. That wasn't explained. It was more like give everything of yourself to other people and somehow you'll find yourself. It was very kind of centric on the second
Others.
part of St. Ignatius's life, where he goes into the cave and gives everything up and only eats, bugs and all that kind of stuff. um,
Huh.
like that was uh, the best thing, the thing that you should strive for. And we learned about the third part about how he found a better balance in kind of living the two sides of equality, I guess, between those two. But it really felt like, oh man, but wouldn't you be such a hero? Wouldn't you be such a good person if you would volunteer all your time and never have any space for yourself?
How do you think that wisdom has grown in you as you live in a world and society that is, on one level, very self-centered,
Mhm.
and in another way, sort of purporting to be other-centered? Now, let's make it either or, but in that image of filling up one's cup in order to be able to give generously and healthily to others, how do you think you've grown that wisdom, or you're growing that wisdom to say, let me look inward and find myself in there, find the gift of who I am, and then move from that gift, that goodness, that blessing out? How did you get there? Or I'm sure you're still working at it. It's a journey,
Yes,
isn't it?
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say I'm still growing there. I'm still and it'll probably change in the next 5 months, next year, who knows? Um, I can only really speak to, how I've grown up until this point. But it seemed like to me there was a lot of pressure that in order to be a good Catholic or a good daughter or, smart student, you had to perform in this certain way. And everywhere you looked, everybody was kind of performing the same way and acted the same, and they were praised. And then, breaking from that cycle and coming out to California and experiencing, I'm sure everyone does when they go to college, a myriad of views and personalities and, backgrounds and heritages, actually. I guess that makes sense. Really helped me be more aware of how much I'm giving myself and how much I guess I can look more like myself while still being good. I think I want to talk a little bit more about that kind of idea of thinking that there was something wrong with me. And I think growing from that has been my greatest accomplishment to date. I am so proud of myself for that one. I think it was just a, intrinsic belief since before I can even remember of there's, something wrong with me. There's something different about me and it's bad. Um, and I think I got those, subtle messages from the people around me, not being straight or white or, thinking in the same ways that my peers did in high school made me think that there was something wrong with me. And it's funny because there were only a few instances where someone directly told me that there was something wrong with me, when I came out or when I publicized myself in a way that showed my true nature. That's when I kind of got the verbal, I guess, indication that there was something wrong with me. And all the other times were just kind of a weird look or, some distance or isolation.
And the subtleties added up, didn't it?
Hmm. Exactly. And then, one of the things that was passed down to me from my heritage, like I mentioned earlier, is that kind of togetherness. And the way that my family shows togetherness and intimacy is through physical touch and, loud parties and music, and not so much on gift giving, but definitely food. We show love in a lot of different ways. And I think that I didn't connect on some of those levels. For example, I hate loud parties and I really don't like physical touch. And I thought, oh, because I don't show my love in those same ways that everybody else seems to do, there must be something wrong with me. And that's actually why I first started going to therapy, because I wasn't, showing my mom love in the same way that she was showing it to me. And I was kind of distancing myself. And now that I've come out of on the other side and come out of kind of that thought pattern that I was wrong or bad, I've realized that it's just different. There's no goodness or badness about it. It's just a difference. And I can lean into that difference and show my love through playing music. That definitely stuck with me. Or, making crafts. I think there's many other ways that I can do it that make me feel more like myself and still show my love. I'm a piano teacher now, and I think that really helps me show my love towards my students and kind of anybody who listens.
I want to jump on that word there. Difference really scare people, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Mhm.
It in all the realms, difference scare people.
Mhm.
We tend to gravitate to the people who are most like us in cafeterias, in meetings, schools. And when we come face to face with something or someone or even an idea that we don't understand, we somehow do something to it. We alienate. That's where you were caught someplace. You were caught in that a little bit, huh?
Mhm. Yeah, it's like feeling like an alien.
So that's
um,
when you moved out of that box and went into the circle.
yeah, yeah.
Huh? And
Mhm.
in that circle, you could find yourself
Mhm. You could see
somewhere.
everybody else. Nobody was hidden, and I could really, excuse me, see all of the differences between us as humans and as, my limited scope of friends. But
Mhm.
to see those differences and to love them the same and for them to love me the same.
So look, we're sharing a little bit here, kind of a public sharing. And you're talking to somebody with this title, Sister Brenda. So I kind of
Mhm.
think toward a religious bent.
Yeah.
And if you will, somehow with your words, teach us a little bit to see you and respect you. And I'm just not saying you as Natalie, but anybody who does not fit in that black or white category of acceptance. How do we get from the square to the circle, seeing each other without fear? And that comes on all these different levels. Look at the politics that we're in right now, huh? Look at the
Um,
cultural issues we have with violence in this country. Look at that. People who have guns and people who don't have guns. Now everybody want guns because we're afraid of the ones who have guns. Now I'm just
yeah.
going topic here, but how do we, take a look at that, step back a little bit? And do you have any perspective on that you haven't already tried to communicate with me here?
I can speak for myself. I can say, okay, this is how I got from my square to my circle. And it makes me really sad to think about how I don't have faith that we as a society will make it from that square to a circle. I think this most recent election proved that there are more than the majority of us who believe that our differences should stay different and that our differences do not make us more unique as a whole. And that makes me sad. And that makes me kind of resonate with what you said about kind of the guns, wanting to protect myself more, protect me and who I care about and my circle from, these other people. And I really hate that. That divides us more than it brings us together. So I have to say, I don't know. I don't know how we can get from exclusivity to inclusivity. I only know it happened for me, so I guess it could happen for other people, but I don't know how.
Well, this is where I have to see if we can, just for a couple of minutes, put some words on it that we might wrestle with here. Where does God fit in? Where does hope fit in? If we give in to fear, fearfulness, as opposed to hopefulness, or godlessness as opposed to godliness.
Mhm.
I'm sounding a little preachy here, aren't I? We can't put ourselves in this black and white box that we've been talking about.
Mhm.
Someplace in there somewhere, we need, I feel, from my perspective, we just need to find a way to bring that fight or flight into something more informed.
I think one of the ways that I felt more confident in myself and more comfortable with the people around me was to see people like me in places of power and in places of success, and people like me experiencing queer joy, Black joy that I'd never seen before.
Uh-huh.
And I think if we had elected the first female Black president to the United States, that would have changed perceptions. It would have said, okay, here is a woman, a Black woman who can be at the same level of everybody else who came before her. And that could inspire millions more to follow in her footsteps, or just even have the joy to share with other people that their heritage is being represented, that their differences are being celebrated. But I can't say that we did that. I can't say that we chose to celebrate our differences and chose to respect our heritages.
Mhm.
When we
Yeah.
give in to fear like this, I think it just creates more fear. And I honestly don't know where God lives in fear, because I really think that they're opposites. I think that, my mom always says God is in the midst of everything, but I can't find God in fear. I can't find hope in its opposite. I also have dabbled quite a bit in dialectical behavioral therapy. I think that's
Mhm.
important to bring up here. The dialectic is holding two seemingly opposite things to be true at the same time without negating each other. So, for example, one of the dialectics that everyone always uses is, "I love my mom, but she's annoying." So in that sentence, we kind of see those two things, I love my mom, but she's annoying, opposing each other. The way that we can kind of have them coexist in the same plane is to switch out that but for an and. So I love my mom and she's annoying. So that
Mhm.
because she's annoying doesn't mean that it negates out the fact that I love her. It's
Mhm.
I'm not saying anything about my mom in this sentence. It's just an example. But I'd love for us, or for me, I guess, to be not so pessimistic and really try to see that and in the middle of these two opposing things, that we are fearful and scared of each other's differences, and God is here anyway. But it's hard for me. I don't
Mhm.
think I can do that. I don't know. I have to think on it more.
What I want to add to what you're just saying there is I
Mhm.
think the and allows us to see the possibilities.
Mhm. It's that circle.
Yeah. It's that thing you talked about moving from the square to the circle that came up earlier. You know, I don't think there's fear in God, but there's fear in us. And if God is in us
Mhm.
and God is inviting us not to be afraid, God talk sometimes is a closed issue for people because folks can say, I don't believe in God. But you might feel, I don't feel a presence of God in all of this. Going back to how you described it in the and, I think there's a way where to have that experience of God gives us an experience of each other that then leads to the courage to know better, to do better, to see better. Now, that might not make sense to a whole lot of people, but from my particular heritage and my particular understanding, there's more to it than the fear. And even if the president that we wanted were elected, and with great disappointment, I say that, um, is it going to change 50% of the people in this country?
Absolutely not.
I don't think it will change 50% of the people. There's a great transformation that has to happen that's beyond any one side. And you have great wisdom in your and.
I find myself, after 10 years of doing this, like, I never say but anymore. And I think that's what allowed me to find my true self as being non-binary and seeing both sides, living in that gray area, is to incorporate the and, to let the buts be buts.
And we can let God be God, and we can do what we were called to do, and that's to love one another, accept each other, see each other, huh? Let God be God.
Yeah. It really does baffle
All right.
me. I get sad and confused when I think about the exclusivity I learned from Catholicism, and I wish I'd learned it from you. I wish I'd learned it from somebody who has the experience of being excluded in several ways, instead of learning it from a white man, you know? I think I would have connected with it a lot more if it had been taught in the ways that it was intended to be taught, because Jesus was a Jew. He was excluded, and that's why we have that kind of community that we have, that ideals of openness and togetherness, and then apply it for power, and that warps it and twists it and doesn't show in the same light that it was intended to.
And that is the mystery of trying to sort out why things are the way they are. We human beings have been on that path for a very long time. People, all of us in this country, we don't recognize Jesus was a Jew and an immigrant. Jesus
Mhm.
was a brown man. Uh, Jesus was a man that was rejected, and yet we elevate the teachings of Jesus while putting down the very people that Jesus was himself. It's the mystery of how we sort out as human beings our fear of difference. What you have to say to your generation, moving from the square to the circle,
Mhm.
is powerful, Natalie.
Mhm. I was thinking
What do you
about
say?
that, kind of about how my generation has a different view on things, or how we want to progress in the future. And first thing that came to mind was the Serenity Prayer. That God grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think my generation is particularly focused on that second part, the courage to change the things I can. I think we're still working out the wisdom to know the difference. I don't think that'll ever be decided. But that second part, I feel that has really driven us to
Mhm.
not make the mistakes of our parents and try to be better as humans towards each other and towards our planet. And I was going to ask you, actually, do you think that that is just a part of being young? That kind of desire to change things? Or is it something that's unique to this generation or my generation?
Well, I would have to say from my experience, that's a driving call to every generation.
Mhm,
Um, but in every generation, there's a there's a force toward making things different, making
mhm,
things better, making things more whole for the next generation. And while I think we're in a critical time in history, because even our very planetary existence is at risk, I think that the young people now and coming behind us have a greater challenge than ever was.
mhm.
Like dinosaurs, it's a matter of existence. Anyway, listen, Natalie, we've had a great conversation, and we might have to have a part two on this. But you shared you shared the serenity prayer, which is a beautiful truth, a truth that is filled with trust and hope. But I always sort of come to a conclusion in my conversations with guests by asking, is there one truth in your 22 years of life that you live by, that you haven't already shared but that maybe you want to put in one sort of succinct sentence. One truth.
One truth. I'd say that I don't know. And there's beauty in not knowing. I'm so young. There's so many things to be figured out, and change is the only thing that is constant. And I think there's beauty in change.
There's beauty in change. I love it. Thank you sharing your circle with me.
I'm happy to.
And now for the wrap up. You have just had a human experience from a spiritual being. We have so much to learn. So go forth to love and speak the truth. Ad majorem Dei Gloria.